Hey friends, thanks for joining me, Jim Baroud, to hear a few insights from leaders who represent our innovation ecosystem. Today's chat is with Abran Maldonado, the director of the New York City Media Lab. He is also a co-founder of Create Labs and an OpenAI community ambassador. So, Abran, give us a sort of a quick background on your involvement in AI, in tech, to bring us sort of up to speed from your perspective.
So my name is Abran Maldonado, co-founder of Create Labs. I'm by title a dev ambassador, a developer community ambassador for OpenAI, which means I've been with them since the beginning of GPT-3, supporting the community. Everyone is able to book office hours with me. There's a link to book a Calendly meeting with me on the OpenAI website, where a lot of people reach out when they're just getting started with these models. I was one of the lucky ones to be there right from the beginning to test these models as they were still in alpha, not even beta. So, I used DALL-E 1 before DALL-E 2 was released. And, the same with GPT-3 and some of the future models that are coming out. And just been a great ambassador to the rest of the community. I'm not employed by them. They don't pay me. But it has been a mutually beneficial relationship.
Okay, great. So bring us up to date. Okay, you've been an ambassador for GPT-3. Give us sort of a quick timeline of how we got to where we are now with
Sure.
ChatGPT.
So GPT-2 came out around 2019, but was deemed too dangerous for the public, mainly around the safety restrictions that weren't able to happen back then. So when GPT-3 came out to a private beta, it was maybe less than 1,000 people right at the heart of the pandemic around July 2020. So I was one of those folks that was selected for that private beta by Greg directly. So Greg Brockman is the president of OpenAI. And I still have that Twitter message where he was like, send me your email. The rest was history. Well, at the time, when they started to see how we were using the system, there was a woman on the team. Her name was Ashley Pasilipin, and she's now an astronaut. She started a space company called Titan. There's might be a picture of me, a group picture of me on a rocket somewhere. So I'm excited about that. But she was like, look, I'm excited with the things the use cases, the social impact use cases that you're doing with the AI system. Would you like to be an ambassador? And I didn't know what that meant. So now it's maybe 5 or 6 of us that meet weekly. We have been meeting weekly nonstop for 3 years to discuss the models, the ethics around them, giving them feedback, working with the product managers for each new model, and just coming up with different ideas of how it could apply to the market, things that we're seeing from our office hour calls that we need to take back to the team and get additional feedback on. So it's been a great relationship. I call us the AI Avengers. We're like this secret group of folks that, we've taught a lot of people how to use these systems, a lot of people that have gone on to raise rounds, but a lot of them, consult with us first.
Great. Okay. So that's your background. Were you ready for what happened with this release?
No, and they weren't either. So they released GPT-3, and then after that, it was Codex and Copilot. So that was the code generating model. And then we were testing out Chat and DALL-E in the back end, but just for research purposes. And then eventually they were like, look, we're going to put out DALL-E as a public facing application. And I thought that was pretty brave, given the amount of implications that you have to worry about with an image generator. That seemed to pan out well, but they waited till they had more safety restrictions kind of put in place. And then ChatGPT just kind of dropped out of nowhere, and they were not expecting this kind of response. And it's been like all hands on deck for them, just from a server standpoint, just to make sure that they can handle the bandwidth of everyone being on all at once. I mean, I think they were probably expecting 30 to 50,000 folks, but they got 1 million in 5 days and then another million in 24 hours later after that. And we haven't seen that kind of spike since, Google and some of the other major platforms.
Well, that's certainly like the fastest adoption, right, ever, according to some of the charts, right? So, So they didn't, the communication, that was by design, right? They wanted to just put it out there, or is there a strategy here that we should all be aware of?
No, I think it really was just putting it out there and feeling confident. And that's the thing. Once they got to a point, even with uh, internal submissions. So the way GPT-3 worked though for a long time was if you had a commercial use case, you had to submit a formal proposal. And then it was reviewed by a human panel that got back to you via email, scheduled time to discuss your use case before it went live to production. So once they got to a point of automating that, even I knew I was like, okay, they've really controlled for a lot of the safety parameters around this to make sure that they could even approve use cases automatically without human review. So I knew on the back end that we're probably in a better situation to release something publicly without there being a lot of human oversight and human moderation. And ChatGPT, even with ChatGPT, they take iterative feedback from how the community is using it. So when they see something happen, they adjust it on the fly. And they've been really good about some, for instance, one of the couches of ChatGPT is that it would respond a lot with, "I'm just an AI assistant. I can't answer that question," and it would use that as almost like a crutch. So even with that kind of crutch response, they've addressed it and really dug into like, okay, well, let's make it more open-ended and not have it rely so much on its default responses.
Got it. All right. So were you super impressed with what's happened so far, or a mix of apprehension and concern, or what's give us
Very
sort of your
conflicted. Yeah,
impressions
very
as someone in
conflicted.
this field?
Yeah, it was a mixed bag for me, mainly because I had experienced this back in 2020, where I was developing chatbots and developing a lot of. I probably have several hundred prompts, and we'll talk about what prompts are, but like different use cases of this chatbot that I've developed on my own. And I would set up these live sessions, Clubhouse, live discussions to academic communities and live appearances where I let people talk with the AI. And I saw the light bulbs and the aha moments happen for everybody. So now that's happening at scale for everybody again now because they got to have public use of ChatGPT. So I know this moment that everyone's having. I experienced it 3 years ago, but now it's happening at scale. And I am a little concerned, because there were a lot of people, anytime iPhone or Apple does another release, they call it the startup killer because they're going to bake in a lot of startup releases, a lot of startup ventures that are already out there, and they're going to bake in some of those features, and a lot of startups are going to die as part of that new Apple release. So this kind of did a bit of that because there was a lot of companies that were trying to raise rounds, start ventures, build startups on their particular use of GPT-3 that is now automatically given to everybody through ChatGPT. And you have a lot of like code explainers, text summarizers, chatbot, copywriters. There's a lot of systems out there that have been trying to build a business around what ChatGPT can do for you in an instant. So I feel for those developers that now have to be nimble and think about how do I pivot. And I also have to cautiously think about how people try and use this without thinking through all the ethics and the implications to their business and using it properly. But also it's fun. It's fun and the UI is amazing. So a lot of people now are having a light bulb moment that they didn't have before with GPT-3.
Right. And so when we think of use cases, what are those that are, top three, let's just say? I'm sure there's more, but give us
Yeah.
a top three as at this point in time.
So you have to think of all these as like cousins, all in the same family. So if you think about GPT-3, Codex, which is the code generator, Dolly, and now there's Pointy, which is like a 3D generation model that just came out like this week. So they all know each other. So there was a system called Codex that generated code. Now, ChatGPT can generate code just as well as Codex because it's baked into it. And I have been seeing a lot of people use ChatGPT for co-writing code, cleaning up code that they may have written, explaining code they just dump into the chatbot, copywriting. I mean, I have a lot of clients that I have to write like SOWs for, scope of works, of like, all right, you want me to build this thing for you? You know, I got to write this, 3-page doc, 4-page doc, explaining how I'm going to do this, the timelines, the project deliverables. I feed one example to ChatGPT and it gives me another one in an instant. So it's lessened my workflow, writing press releases. I just had to write a JD, a job description for hiring a grad student. It did it in under 3 minutes for me. So there's a lot of things in your workflow that could really be expedited to make your workflow more efficient, to make you focus on the things that you should be doing rather than in AI.
Got it. And what about the implications for search, right? We've heard a lot about whether it's going to compete with Google, right? I've heard that Microsoft has an investment in it, and there's all this chatter about sort of the implications for the biggest search business on the planet and one of the most profitable companies on the planet, Google.
So it's not connected. None of these systems are connected to the internet. So just to clarify that point, and I think most people know that it's a data dump that is timestamped up until a certain date. So for argument's sake, let's say ChatGPT, and I don't know this for ChatGPT, is of where are we at now? Let's say summer of 2022. So in its current state, it's not going to know anything that happened yesterday in the news or current events. Take, FTX, for instance, and everything that's going on with that case. That's an evolving thing that's happening now, so it's not going to know anything about that. Historical legacy information, it can answer against that now and probably compete and probably do better and give you more context than Google search. Now, think, well, Google searches aren't exactly an exact science either. You get pages and pages of results that you then have to then search through and find the right relevant information. This is going to take to that next step of giving you the most relevant information based on your search. Now, once it's connected to an internet provider, right now, Bing is the only open API that you can connect an AI to search that information for you. Now, if they explore a larger strategic partnership with Microsoft, I think that'll be a game changer. And I think Google should be worried because it's about to disrupt their number one breadwinner in selling advertising around the search results. And so this will be a direct competitor because of providing you results around the context and the relevance of why you're even looking in the first place for that information.
Right. So are you saying that ultimately there will be a web GPT version or advance that's available to the public potentially?
Right now, it's only in like a research stage, the web GPT. They're exploring retrieval, which is what they call it, going and retrieving information from the internet. And anything done right now by independent developers with Bing is basically just doing a web scrape, right? It's scraping the internet. Now, how reliable that information is, it's not going to be very reliable, right? Now, if you partner with a provider at the leadership level with like a Microsoft or even like a Google, if they decide to play nice with each other, then you can start building in code to make sure that the results are showing up that are more relevant. But right now, it's basically just doing a web scrape with the independent folks working off of that Bing API. And when you search results right now, so we entered this information age. And what Google did for us as we entered this information age is that we've entered the age of finding all things, being able to find all things via the internet. What OpenAI is going to do is help us enter the stage where like we will be able to know all things. So it's going from the finding of information to the knowledge retention and gaining knowledge around these topics in a way that makes sense for each of us. So education is going to be vastly different in the next 5-10 years because of systems like this.
Got it. Well, let's talk about education, and then we'll try to get to some questions. how is this going to change K-12 and beyond? There's
Yeah.
a lot there.
So for my background, for those who don't know, I have, I'm a dinosaur in the EdTech space. I've been in EdTech since it really started as an ecosystem around 2011, 2012. As an EdTech founder, I'm working with Verizon right now on their EdTech portfolio, and have helped other startups win EdTech SBIRs. So I've seen it. I've seen the shifts over the last, few years, and before that, being an educator in the classroom, of what this is going to do. We were saying middle schoolers in like the mid 2000s, early 2000s are going to end up working a job that doesn't exist yet. And that's been held to be completely true. Absolutely. This is going to shift what our standards are based around, what skills we're basing on. And it's actually matching up with the research around like 21st century skills. So we saw back around 2010, there was a lot of research around 21st century skills and the 4 C's, which was like creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. I read all those books. My PhD was around these 20th century skills, and they nailed it. At the time, they were saying automation and computers are going to replace a lot of these skills. So you need to focus on these skills that are harder to replace with computers around these 4 C's. But if you think about an essay now, right? So the writing of the essay is going to be gone soon, right? With these kinds of tools. So what was most important in that exercise? Was it the writing of the essay, or was it the retention of the knowledge that you're displaying from that essay? Because if it's the latter, then you're going to have to find other ways for them to present the knowledge that they've gained from that research and from that homework assignment. Maybe presenting verbally, TED Talk style in the classroom, and focusing more on public speaking because you don't have a paper in front of you anymore. Demonstrating fluency and understanding of the topics that you were researching, rather than focusing on, was it written well? Because that right now, you worry about K-12, there's people at 9 to 5s in their profession that are using ChatGPT, and their supervisors aren't the wiser.
Right. And so speaking of professionals and the working class, how will this disrupt the workforce or complement the workforce?
Well, if you're a people manager, I'm a people manager. I have people that I manage, and if you're evaluating performance based on productivity or things that they're actually doing themselves, you have to rethink that, because my comms manager, I gave her a license to write press releases with AI, and I can't evaluate the quality of her press releases based on her skills, because I know that she's likely going to be using AI to produce a lot of the content for websites, copy, press releases. Like, there are certain things that we were evaluating staff on before based on productivity. Productivity is going to go up. Efficiency is going to go up. But whether or not that was written manually, or just proofread by an employee, a human employee, we're going to have to evaluate performance differently. But you can get excited about productivity going up, but certain jobs maybe not being valued as much. I'm working on, I'm under NDA trying to land a certain client, a large financial institution, and being their AI agency of record, of like handling all of their copy for their website, image generation, all with AI. And it's because working with the current agency that they've been working with has been a pain in the ass. They get charged, astronomical amounts just for like revisions and reviews and going back for adding to the scope because something might be out of scope. Where now I'm just building a tool for them that's completely based on their brand, that anything that they prompt from this tool will be auto-generated with AI, but completely trained on that company. So they don't have to worry about the language being, or the tone being off, because they're teaching it the tone and the voice that they need for their company.
Got it. Okay. One last thing, and then we'll open it up. Safety, bias. Can you talk to those two topics as they relate to this new development?
Yeah, I mean, I say often on these talks that like the A behind the system doesn't get blamed enough. whenever we talk about bias. Like you see a lot of articles pop up saying that the AI is biased without blaming the engineers behind the AI that provided it that data, that set up those parameters, that set up those guardrails of what to say and what not to say. So the engineers behind it don't get blamed enough. There's not enough personal accountability. And any bias in like data sets, it's just reflecting what you gave it. So if you gave it a data set, whatever bias is reflected in that data set is going to be biased in the AI. And a lot of folks use Wikipedia for these systems. A lot of these open source AI models and these language models. I think it's like 87% of Wikipedia pages are written by white males. So if you're seeing something skewed towards white males in the data set, it's because it got it from Wikipedia. So it's not really something that you could really blame the AI on. It's, you know, how equitable is the information that you're feeding the AI.
Got it. All right, let's open this up.
The OpenAI is that, I mean, is this going to become charged? You say it's a public experiment now, but I'm just wondering when or how the fees might start for using it.
I mean, so I believe ChatGPT is going to stay this fun toy, and they're going to direct people to maybe, because I think they're going to. One option is they're going to leave it as this toy that everyone uses to kind of like get exposure to what's possible with these tools. And then when you say, okay, I want to build something with this, then they're going to say, okay, then go into our playground and use GPT-3. And GPT-3 right now there is a business model attached where it's kind of, you pay for the tokens that you use as you're building something or trying to commercialize something, even with fine tuning. Now, they could use this as kind of like the initial carrot that they dangle to get you on board with the other tools. But if they want to have this kind of be its own tool because of how viral it went and how many more people are using ChatGPT as the interface rather than the playground as the interface, then they're going to have to think through, you know, how to build a model around that, which in the other ones, it's based on how many tokens, how many responses. I was just using it last night and it told me to slow down. So they're already thinking about ways to kind of like, you know, limit the bandwidth of how often you could ping it, how often you could use it. There's a lot of people who are trying to build their own like plugins, APIs around it right now, like reverse engineer. And that is even being kind of flagged, where if they see your account shifting to too many IP addresses, they shut it down. So if people are trying to use it as a product, they are going to start putting in more parameters around it.
Got it. And what would be the business model, potential business models for OpenAI or for this product? Is it licensing or is it per search or micropayments?
So the business model will likely be similar to GPT-3 with the token usage. Okay. So right now, and I call it GPT-3, but at this point it's 3.5. It's not 4 yet, but they have officially announced that it is 3.5. It's a certain amount per 1,000 tokens that you use. So it's like a CPM, but like a CPT, I guess you could call it. So for everything that you're using it for, it's going to cost you, let's say, 5 cents per 1,000 tokens. And then you just got to limit or scale how often you use it, and then think about that as your overhead.
What about the legalities, especially when it comes down to accessing other people's content and then creating something new with it? I mean, we saw what happened with sampling when rap, you know, started using that prolifically, right? Especially in the visual. Somebody's got a pooch. Especially on the visual side, is there going to be maybe a government crackdown where they say, like, look, you cannot use everybody's IP to create this stuff?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I come from a music background. I worked in the music industry for years before I got into tech. And I use the sampling analogy a lot, especially when it comes to AI art, because we are at that same juncture where the jazz and the blues musicians and the purists were like, hey, you're using my incomplete track to make this new rap record, and I didn't approve that. And but a lot of people are blaming the AI artists, but when it came to hip hop producers, they were not voluntarily including, you know, BB King and James, Boldy James and all these guys into their royalties. They had to be forced by legal entities to do that. So it's either going to be forced in the same way that it was forced on the publishing houses to include sampling credits by some government entity. But I think this is kind of a blurred line between sampling and giving your music samples to like a sound library, right? And that's a little different because with a sound library like Omniverse, and for those of you in the music world, it's a sound library that you download, and every time you hit a button, it plays like a chord of a horn or a string or a piano key. Like those people aren't getting royalties if Kanye or Dr. Dre uses that sound library to make a hit record. No one's getting paid royalties off of that because you gave your license-free music to this library, and in such small increments is like grains of sand, which is what it's compared to now in these models, that it's going to be impossible to know if your grain of sand was being used. But to be part of the whole data set, whoever said yes in the beginning with like this fair use content is going to have to protect their stuff and be like, well, you can't be I can't be added to your data set if there's not either some upfront payment or some type of like ongoing licensing fee.
So how do artists protect themselves from that?
Well,
visual artists.
For artists, OpenAI doesn't do that. But for these other clones, I can't speak for like the Midjourneys and the stable diffusions of those. But if you've ever uploaded your art on something and you didn't read the fine print that said that we're going to use this for other purposes, that's where your art lives now. You know what I mean? They're selling it to these other systems.
Cool.
I think Hody I saw next.
Hey there, thanks so much. I'm in the university setting, and I just thought it was really interesting that you said, how will this disrupt or complement? And I think that's the piece that's really scaring the university that I'm at is they're trying to figure out how to punish or catch people using AI instead of figuring out how to augment it, how to teach with it as a learning tool and as a support. And I guess my question is, in my head, that goes into the human machine teaming arena. Do you have any like best practices or people who are using it institutionally well yet that we could be watching and modeling after?
At the university level, you're saying, where they're embracing it?
Yeah, or corporations or, creative endeavors. I think people are really scared in my environment, and they're saying this is a new kind of plagiarism, but they don't really know where to put it or point at. But I don't see it going away. And if we embrace it and learn how to use it well and responsibly and teach students what critical thinking and quality control and how to find good data or fact check. I don't know what the levels of usage and advanced usage will be, but I just feel like I would love to have models to be able to point to or share so that the people who are really, digging in their heels against this and as a,
I get it. So I think as an educator, I'm going to have to challenge I'm happy to do this all again with more academics that are in the classroom and to think about this critically, but I put the onus back on them. If use the system against, not to say against, but like use the system as well. Because for instance, one way, if a student submits something to you that you think is plagiarism, copy and paste that entire essay back into the system and say, hey, can you read this essay and let me know if it loosely aligns to something else that might be written out there? If it feels like plagiarism with a couple words shifted here and there. Use the AI system against itself, right? Use AI against the AI. And also you can even submit an essay that was, submitted by a student back into the AI and say, okay, now give me some critical thinking questions against this where I can see if the students retain this knowledge. you know, if you embrace how to use it on your end, then you're not being left behind. But also, I think that there's other ways to look at it. That I was in a classroom where all of the computers in a middle school, city-based public school did not allow for YouTube and a host of other like websites to be accessed. The kids jailbroke every computer there, middle schoolers, and downloaded music making softwares. They jailbroke YouTube, and for the kids who lived on that block, they were able to access their home Wi-Fi and put it on the computers in the computer lab in the school. So fighting against this and being retaliatory and reactionary is not going to work. Your kid's going to find a way around it. Even if they come out with systems that detect, was this written by AI, that is going to be based on GPT, OpenAI, GPT 3.5. And then when GPT-4 comes out, it's not going to work on GPT-4. And then you have to build a new AI detection system that matches with GPT-4, and then 5 is going to come out. So it's going to be this rat race of like, is your detection software good enough to compete with the AI software that's out there? So instead of doing that, just embrace it, find new ways to evaluate knowledge in your classroom that's more human and less of the rule of thumb for a lot of people who are writing about the computers taking over is that if you are giving a task that is if then, education or in a workplace, if there is an if then logic to the task, if I see this, I do that, it is going to be automated, full stop. So you have to start giving work, whether in the workplace or in the classroom, that is not based on if then logic, that is based on creativity, critical thinking, blended classroom, flipped classroom, doing work together in the room rather than assigning it at home. You have to reshuffle how we're doing things. Elena, I saw your hand.
Go ahead.
Hey, sorry. So, I mean, we're talking about ChatGPT, but there's also ChatSonic. So I've been playing with a bunch of the AIs, and I helped develop the original chat feature for Facebook, which became Messenger, which did become an advertising thing, right? So I think my concern is really about the privacy. And I know that a few people are already banning content for marketing done through ChatGPT, and a lot of people are they're starting to do that because it is good, but it doesn't have the encompassing information because it cannot do it in real time. Once this gets into real time, that's when we're going to have issues. So once this becomes part of search, I think that's where the concern is. But for me, I have a startup, and so my time is limited, day job, everything else. It created a beautiful business plan, just the basic standard, and for contracts and for things of that nature. I think this is phenomenal. I think this is a time-saving feature. I don't think that the worry is necessarily founded, that it's just going to take over jobs. Maybe, and in the medical field, they also had AI searching pictures to detect cancer, right? Because it's much better to detect cancerous cells, especially on the skin, than a human doctor could. So I do think that there's potential for it. I'm afraid of the corruption, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about, because just the way that we've seen everything happen with all these big companies like Facebook trying to take it over and trying to force everyone into Meta when it was failing. Like, what do you see happening in this whole big tech world? And is it going to become more decentralized and more equal? That's what I'm really curious about, having a privacy startup.
More equal, more decentralized. I mean, I started, and James knows from many iterations of my own work, I started this work as like an advocacy social venture startup, right, doing like tech to talent pipeline work, where showing people in underserved communities, you have to learn these skills to get 6-figure jobs, 7-figure startups, and to not be left behind. And it shifted from like, you have to learn how to code, to like, No, learn these other no-code tools, learn these more tech-enabling tools like NLP, like Bubble, like all these platforms that can just get your creativity out the door
Right.
without having to waste 3 years learning Python or JavaScript. And then by the time you learn it, there's a new programming language that you need to learn. And so I do think tools like this open up the door for so many people who haven't gotten a chance to go to a CS school to get a CS degree, that haven't had a chance to go to a can't afford General Assembly or coding boot camps. And they're just putting in the work now with their creativity and just using, that's why they call it NLP, natural language, and any language. I know people who are German, who are Dutch, who are from Portugal, who are just speaking to the same system that I'm speaking to in their native language and using it in a multilingual way to get to a prototype phase of something that they could then hustle their way up with traction. So I do think it's more enabling. I do tell people who are like nonprofits and advocacy groups to use it to try and solve community problems. That should be number one. Like if someone's like, oh, I want to start a business, find out what the problems are in your community and try and solve it with these AI systems, and you'll have a business right in front of you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. Like I'm on the wait list for the new AI that uses open source files to code your app. So that's coming. That's definitely, I'm just afraid that we're going to be pushed by these giant companies into the sort of like AI ecosystem that's powered by AI, telling us that it's all and be all, and then just use it to advertise against us, because your data is really valuable. Your data now sits at $120 per person.
I mean, I was worried about, I mean, I know we're probably 10, 20 years away from it. I was worried about Neuralink. So Neuralink with BCIs, like brain chip interfaces, you know, and everyone thinking like, oh, I need to get a brain chip implanted in my head to then compete in the workplace. Because then you're going to have a workplace where you have people that have brain implants and then you have people who don't. And then the people with brain implants are going to outperform the people who don't. And then you're almost going to be forced to get a brain implant because you're not performing as well as those that do have BCIs. So, and I am worried about that, but this is probably the step below that step of like, are you using AI in your workflow or are you not? You're doing everything manually? Well, shit, it's going to take you 2 weeks to deliver on something that Abe just delivered in 5 minutes. So I don't know if I can really wait that long on certain things. So it is something that we're going to have to embrace, or we continue to value as people the industries that don't need it, and put more stock in those industries and make those cool again. The arts, things that are more creative. You know, if we can do more to focus on bring their value up, then there might be also a shift in like people, oh, you know how to do this by hand? Think about the people who like make cars by hand, and those cars are like 10 times the value of something that came off of a factory line. Handcrafted work has such a premium value because of the rarity and the time that went into it. I think a handwritten movie script, a handwritten essay, you know, handwritten music, hand painted art, the value of that's probably going to go up because there's going to be so much automated stuff out there.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I hope so. I hope you're right.
We all do. I want to make sure there's see if there's any other questions, Alina. Any other questions from anyone?
Jeff? Oh, sorry, you're just clapping. My bad.
Yeah, sorry about that. I used the wrong emoji.
Yeah, okay.
I agree with you on that last point. And one thing I was thinking of, and one thing that I think I've seen and we've seen over the years, is the easiest way to do something is the way people want to do it. So a lot of people are out there that say, in general, I don't like Amazon because it's destroying my downtown. But man, Amazon delivers something. Now it's delivering something. It says, do you want it at 4 a.m.? So, you know, the same thing with, you know, handcrafted goods and things like that. I mean, you get to the point where you have the AI attached to a maker bot or something like that, and it could create something so insane in such a short period of time that people say, wow, I could go for the handcrafted thing and wait 6 months, or I could have this at my doorstep tomorrow. And I don't know, I just think that some of these things that are happening now, the velocity of it is so unpredictable, and it's increasing the velocity. So it's going to be really interesting to see people pushing the limits and how fast they're going to be implementing things. I'm seeing it already on the legal side, and some of the legal tech stuff that I read. And I read some stuff on the AI side and the legal side, and some lawyers were evaluating some of the product that was being generated. And some of it was positive, but some of it's negative. I read something recently where the AI was able to write sort of like a brief. It had case citations and the whole thing, but when a human lawyer looked at it and read it, they're like, it's wrong in its central premise. You could read it and you're like, wow, this is amazing that it wrote this, but it was wrong. And it's probably because of a limited data set. It missed maybe some cases that post-dated the data set, but I do see it as, I think you're going to have, just like in everything, the early adopters who really just grab this by the horns and run with it as quickly as possible. You're going to see some people pushing the use cases so fast, and not necessarily advertising the limitations of the data sets. And it goes back to the old days of, I'm not saying this is garbage, but garbage in, garbage out. If you have a data set that's full of errors, you're going to end up with a product that's full of errors. So I don't know. I'm a lot of lawyers are definitely watching this stuff very closely. And you raised some issues already on fair use and sampling and things, and even ownership. There's lots of stuff there that it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so I think that's where we saw the opportunity for our own business. So, we're a startup where we know the stuff forwards and backwards, and the business opportunity that we are presenting to enterprise is that if you want to trust this AI, it has to be trained on your brand forwards and backwards. It has to be an expert on your products and on your business and your business messaging. So that's an additional layer of like prompt engineering that we do on top of it, because out the box, this stuff can't be trusted. It will bullshit, and it wants to give you an answer, whether it knows the information or not. So it wants to give you 500 to 700 words to satisfy your craving for an answer, but it's going to make up a lot of that stuff if it doesn't know the full context on your brand, your messaging, your product, what we're even talking about, the research behind it. So there is like this, we call them like hallucinations or the bullshit factor when it comes to GPT-3. So there is always that risk, and the business opportunity for us has been like, you do the homework of giving us everything that you want this AI to know, and we'll make sure that it knows it, and only this. And we'll put up what we call guardrails to make sure that it doesn't deviate left or right, to make up things that it shouldn't be discussing.
All right, this has been great, Abran. Thank you so much for coming out and explaining this for us. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please like it, leave a review, and subscribe. See you soon.